Have you ever felt like everything you once believed, everything that held your spiritual world together, suddenly stopped making sense? Not in a dramatic way, not even with warning, just an unraveling. One day, you're lighting your candles, pulling your cards, channeling healing energy, and the next you're staring into space, wondering why none of it moves you anymore. If you're here, chances are you've already gone through 1,000 tiny awakenings. You've shed skin after skin, belief after belief. You've meditated through heartbreak, visualized your way out of fear, whispered affirmations in the dark. You've spent years peeling back layers of ego, trauma, illusion. But now something deeper is happening, and it doesn't feel like awakening. It feels like collapse. No one talks about this stage. It doesn't sell books. It doesn't look good on a vision board. It doesn't have a name that rolls off the tongue in yoga studios. But it's real. And if you're experiencing it, you already know. It's the most sacred, most terrifying transformation of your life. This is the final awakening. Not everyone makes it here. Not even the ones who talk about being awakened. Not even the light workers, the energy practitioners, the spiritual influencers. Because this isn't about knowledge. It's not about technique. It's not about how many people you've helped. It's about what's left when everything is stripped away. Even your spiritual identity. And let's be honest, it doesn't feel like grace. It feels like death. Not the death of your body, but of your constructs, of your story, of your role, of the healer you thought you were, of the purpose you clung to like a life raft. At this stage, the universe doesn't whisper, it rips. It tears open everything that still holds shape in your psyche. It yanks away your comfort, your rhythm, even your inner voice, until there's nothing left but raw, vibrating silence. And you can barely speak it out loud. Because how do you explain that the tools you spent years mastering now feel like empty rituals? How do you admit that the joy of helping others has turned into a strange, hollow stillness? That the sacred work you once lived for now feels like someone else's life? You don't. Not easily. Because even in spiritual circles, people will try to fix you, tell you to rest, reset, reframe. They'll say you're blocked, misaligned, out of flow. But you know. You're not blocked. You're being undone. This is the sign that no one warned you about, when the very light you once radiated begins to implode, not to destroy you, but to empty you. Because what's coming is too big to fit inside the healer you used to be. This isn't burnout. It's rebirth in disguise. And it only happens to the ones who are ready to become something they've never seen before. If you're here, it means your soul signed up for a deeper kind of remembering. One that doesn't come through teachings or transmissions, but through silence. Through surrender, through stillness so vast, it echoes. You didn't arrive at this stage by accident. You reached it because you were brave enough to keep going when it stopped being pretty, when it stopped being rewarding, when it stopped being about anyone else's validation. You kept walking, right into the void. And now the void is answering. What you're feeling is not weakness. It's initiation. The kind that can't be guided by any external mental, because you're stepping into territory that only your soul has the map for. This stage is hidden for a reason, because it cannot be taught, only endured, only embodied. There are no teachings that can fully prepare you for the feeling of waking up and realizing you don't want to fix anything anymore. Not others, not yourself, not the world. Not because you don't care, but because you finally see that healing isn't your identity, it's your nature. And nature doesn't try, it just is. At this point, you begin to feel something ancient rumbling beneath the silence. Something pre-apricé, pre-ego, pre-purpose. It doesn't have a name, it doesn't need one, and yet it's the most alive you've ever felt, if only for a few fleeting seconds before the emptiness returns. That emptiness, it's holy, but your mind won't understand that right away. It will fight, it will label. It will panic. It will beg you to do something, anything, to feel useful again. And still, your body won't move. Your soul won't let you. Because the deeper truth is, you're not meant to do right now. You're meant to be unmade. Everything inside you is being reordered. The currents are reversing. The energy is rearranging itself in ways that no longer match who you were or what you thought your path looked like. And that's the secret. That's why this stage is hidden. Because from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. It's still, but from within, entire universes are collapsing. Timelines are being deleted. Old contracts are being burned to ash. You're not just healing anymore, you're transcending healing itself. And it hurts, it's confusing, it makes no sense to your old mind. But you feel it, in your bones, in your breath, in the spaces between your thoughts. Something sacred is coming. But before it arrives, everything else must leave. So if you're here right now, unsure of what's happening, wondering why nothing is working, questioning your worth, your path, your calling, pause. Breathe. This is the sign you were never told to look for. This is the moment the true healer is born. Not with light, but with fire. Not with bliss, but with silence. Not with answers, but with an ending. And in that ending, the ancient memory of who you truly are begins to stir. Let it rise. There comes a moment on the path, one you don't anticipate and one no teacher really warned you about, when everything you thought made you who you are begins to fall apart. Not the outer parts, not your home, your relationships, your routine. No, those may have already been stripped away earlier in your journey. This time, the loss goes deeper. This time it's personal in a way that's hard to explain, because it's not your life unraveling now. It's your identity, more specifically, the identity you so lovingly built around being the healer. You see, for years, maybe even lifetimes, you carried the archetype of the healer like a sacred badge. You were the listener, the empath, the guide, the one people came to when they needed clarity, the one who somehow always knew what to say, what to do, how to hold the space. You became fluent in reading energy, picking up what others were too afraid to say, feeling what they couldn't even articulate. You studied, you trained, you worked with modalities, frequencies, channeling, breathwork, Reiki, tarot, shadow work, quantum healing, ancestral release. Whatever tools you were drawn to. And all of it served you for a time. It gave your path meaning. It gave your pain a purpose. It gave your trauma a direction to alchemize. Being the healer made sense. It felt aligned. It felt noble. It even felt powerful. Until it didn't anymore. And that's where you find yourself now. Not broken, not lost, but disoriented. You wake up and the identity that once anchored you, the one you trusted, the one you sacrificed so much to embody, has become strangely hollow. You no longer feel pulled to offer sessions. You don't feel called to give advice. You open your favorite tools, the deck, the pendulum, the sacred journal, and instead of clarity, you feel numb. There's no spark, no urgency, no sense of duty, just space. And it scares you, because for so long this was who you were. But here's the thing no one tells you. This stage isn't a failure. It's a return. You're not losing your power. You're shedding the need to define yourself by it. What's dissolving isn't your ability to hold light or transmit healing. It's your identity's attachment to being the one who does that. Because somewhere along the way, even in your most sacred intentions, the role became a container. A beautifully carved, lovingly decorated container, but a container nonetheless. And now your soul is too big to fit inside it. There's a grief in this that no one talks about. A silent mourning that moves through you when the title starts to slip through your fingers, not because you need validation, not because you are doing it for praise, but because it was your home. Being the healer gave you structure. It gave your pain a framework to make sense of. It helped you survive the chaos of your own awakening. It gave you something to reach for when everything else fell away, and now that structure is collapsing too. Why? Because the final awakening asks for everything. Not just your wounds, not just your shadows, but also your masks, especially the sacred ones. And healer is still a mask if it's rooted in identity. This is the paradox. You are a healer by nature, but not by name, not by job, not by label. You don't do healing, you are the frequency of transformation. And that frequency cannot be owned, controlled, or claimed. It can only be lived. But to live it purely, you must pass through the fire of detachment. You must be willing to let go of the very thing that once gave your life purpose, even if that means standing in the uncomfortable space of not knowing who you are anymore. You're not lazy, you're not avoiding your calling, you're not abandoning your path. You're being asked to transcend the path entirely, and the first step is releasing the label. It's no longer about what you can do for others. It's about what you can allow to pass through you without resistance, agenda, or ego. And the only way to access that level of divine embodiment is to get out of the way. The healer identity had a timeline. It served its purpose, but now it's dissolving like mist in morning light. You may find yourself feeling empty, uninspired, emotionally quiet. Where there was once devotion, there is now distance. Not because you've grown cold, but because the fire has burned through its old form, and in this strange stillness your mind may panic. You might start looking for what's wrong, trying to fix it, trying to reignite the fire, to return to who you were. But that version of you is already gone, and that's okay. In fact, it's sacred, because now, for the first time, you're being given the opportunity to exist without identity, to stop performing sacredness and instead become sacredness. This isn't a step backward. It's a step inward, a surrender into something ancient, something before words, something before your title, your training, your toolkit. This is what mystics have whispered about for centuries, the holy hollowing, the unraveling of form so that only essence remains. And it hurts, not in a sharp, dramatic way, but in a soft, echoing ache, the kind that moves through your bones when you realize the story you've been living in is over. But the next one hasn't started yet. You're between timelines now, and in this liminal space your system is recalibrating. No more spiritual performance, no more showing up out of obligation, no more confusing service with self-abandonment. Now the only thing that matters is alignment with truth, and that truth, it doesn't need a name. So if you find yourself in the void, unsure of what to call yourself, unsure if you still belong in this spiritual world you once breathed life into, know this: you're not being erased. You're being rewritten by the divine, and the pen is consciousness itself. Your job is not to grasp, your job is to dissolve. Let the title fall away, let the role fall away, let the need to be the one who heals fall away, because what's rising is not an identity, it's a frequency. And that frequency will do more in silence than your old identity ever did through action. There's a new way of being arriving inside you now. It's subtle. It's quiet. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It speaks in stillness, in breath, in the way your energy shifts rooms without saying a word. This new you, the real you, doesn't seek to heal, doesn't try to teach, doesn't strive to save. It just is. And in that being, healing happens. Mirrors shatter, timelines collapse, frequencies shift. Because when you no longer need to be a healer, you become the medicine itself. And then? That is the rarest transformation of all. So let it collapse. Let it all fall, and when the dust settles, don't rush to rebuild. Just listen. Just breathe. Just be. Because in the space where the healer identity once lived, something eternal is remembering itself. There's a moment that comes quietly and without announcement where the desire to help evaporates. You wake up one day and it's just gone. not dulled, not paused, not obstructed by a temporary burnout or emotional overload, but completely absent, like a door that's gently closed itself without your knowing. And when you reach for it out of habit, your hand meets only still air. You don't want to offer advice anymore. You don't want to hold space. You don't want to fix, soothe, guide, uplift, or heal. You don't even want to help yourself, and at first it terrifies you. Because for so long your urge to help was the proof of your spiritual sensitivity. It was the pulse of your compassion, the heartbeat of your purpose. You equated it with your worth. You believed that to be in alignment was to serve, that love, in its highest form, must be expressed through action, through care, through holding, through healing. So when the urge to help dissolves, it feels like something inside you has broken. You question yourself. You wonder if you've grown cold, disconnected, selfish. You think, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I'm emotionally drained. Maybe this will pass. But deep down, you know this isn't temporary. This is different. This isn't about exhaustion. This is about evolution. Because what's leaving you right now is not love. It's the compulsion to interfere. It's the need to rescue. It's the part of you that was still trying to manage the world's pain as a way to manage your own. And that part, it's dying. Because it served its purpose. And now it's time to let it rest. This stillness you're in, the one that feels so strange and unnatural, is sacred. It's not apathy. It's not regression. It's the sacred pause between identities. It's the divine recalibration of your entire system. You see, for years, maybe decades, you've been holding the energetic weight of others, listening deeply, feeling deeply, caring deeply, giving energy, reading emotion, absorbing trauma, offering insight, offering healing, offering yourself. But your nervous system, your spirit, your cells, they're full. You've reached capacity. And this stillness is not a glitch in the plan, it is the plan. You're being emptied out on purpose. Because what's coming cannot enter a space already occupied by effort. This is the part of your awakening where you learn the difference between being the light and constantly trying to give it away. You're learning that your value was never tied to how many people you helped. You're learning that healing isn't a job, or a mission, or a checklist. It's a frequency. And that frequency doesn't need you to chase anything. It needs you to stop, to be still, to become the vessel instead of the fixer. Because something deep inside you knows this. Most of your desire to help came from a place of love, but also from a place of control. A part of you believed that if you could just help enough, fix enough, give enough, love enough, then the world would be okay. Then you would be okay. But now, that illusion is unraveling. Now you're being initiated into a higher trust. Trust that people will find their own way. Trust that pain serves its own sacred purpose. Trust that your presence, not your effort, is the gift. And this trust requires stillness. It requires that you stop doing, stop fixing, stop reaching. It requires that you sit in the quiet of your own energy, even when it feels useless, even when it feels like nothing. Because in that nothing, everything is happening. You're being rewired from the inside out. You're being shown gently and insistently that the universe doesn't need your help, it needs your presence. It needs your frequency, clean, empty, and free of attachment. That's why your desires are disappearing, not because you're broken, but because you're being prepared. You're being called to embody a healing that doesn't move through effort, but through embodiment. You're learning that the highest form of compassion is non-interference. That love doesn't always look like holding someone's hand. Sometimes it looks like watching them fall, knowing they have to. Sometimes it looks like walking away when your old self would have stayed. Sometimes it looks like silence instead of advice, space instead of solutions, stillness instead of saviorhood. You're not here to carry anyone anymore. You're here to become the field in which they remember they never needed to be carried at all. And that's not coldness. That's mastery. Stillness, real stillness, is magnetic. It doesn't pursue, it draws. It doesn't convince, it resonates. It doesn't fix, it transforms. But in order to live at that level, you must first experience the death of your old urge to do. And that death is what you're feeling now. So if you've lost your will to help, if you no longer feel the pull to be the emotional caretaker, the spiritual counselor, the one who always knows what to say, don't fight it, don't judge it, bow to it. Because something ancient is asking to move through you, and it needs space, it needs silence. It needs a vessel, not a manager. Let the old programming dissolve. Let the emptiness wash over you. Let the blankness stretch out in front of you like a horizon. This is not the end of your purpose. This is your purpose, evolving. This is the moment you stop pouring energy outward and begin holding the charge inward. This is where the healer becomes the temple, not the tool, not the teacher, not the guide, but the space itself, where others enter and remember by your being, not your doing. And yes, it's uncomfortable, because you've been taught that love is action, that helping is proof of caring, that doing is what makes you valuable. But now the universe is asking, who are you when you stop? Who are you when there is nothing to fix, when no one needs you? When even you don't need you? Can you still exist? Can you still feel holy? Can you still feel enough? Because if you can find peace in that space, then you've reached the frequency of true healing. And everything that comes after that, every encounter, every conversation, every transmission will carry a depth and resonance that cannot be taught or strategized or planned. It will come through you effortlessly, because you will have become the channel, not the source. And that's the difference between the healer identity and the healer essence. The identity seeks, the essence rests, the identity does, the essence is. So, if you're here now, in that silent, motionless, uncertain space where all your spiritual ambition has dissolved, don't panic. You're not lost. You're remembering. You're not empty, you're becoming whole, and soon you'll see that this sacred stillness you feared, it wasn't the absence of purpose, it was the presence of power. There's a point on your journey where the body begins to speak louder than your mind, louder than your intentions, louder than any spiritual affirmation or visualization you try to overlay on top of it, and what it says is enough. But it doesn't speak in language. It speaks in exhaustion, in pressure, in headaches that no amount of water or rest can cure, in a kind of bone-deep fatigue that feels like gravity has suddenly doubled, in sensitivities that make once normal environments unbearable. Lights feel too sharp, sounds too loud, crowds too overwhelming. Even your own thoughts seem to echo too much inside your skin. You feel like you're unraveling, but you're not. You're being recalibrated. You see, when you reach a certain threshold in your awakening, especially as a healer, a sensitive, a transmuter of emotional fields, your nervous system becomes the final frontier. Your spirit already knows the truth. It always has. Your soul has long since evolved past the need for validation or proving. It doesn't seek, it simply is. But the body holds every residue of the lives you've lived, the identities you've worn, the pain you've carried. Not just yours, but the collective's. All of it sits in the fascia, the cells, the electromagnetic field that surrounds and pulses through you. And there comes a moment, a sacred threshold, when your body decides it cannot carry what your mind still refuses to surrender. So it shuts down, not out of betrayal, but out of mercy. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. Because your system was never designed to hold this much static, this much distortion, this much overextension for this long. The healer in you gave and gave, held and held. You transmuted in silence. You absorbed without complaint. You stood between energies like a bridge. And now the bridge needs to be rebuilt. You didn't get sick, you got stopped. stopped so that you could be rewired at the deepest levels, stopped so that your life force could be rerouted away from the old programming, away from the patterns of self-sacrifice masked as love, away from the belief that exhaustion is noble, that depletion is divine, that pain is your proof of purpose. The truth is, your nervous system is undergoing a spiritual reset, and no one tells you how physical that is. You might feel like your body is betraying you. You might wonder why you can't get out of bed, why you sleep for 10 hours and still wake up tired, why your joints ache even though you're eating clean, why your gut feels off, why your heart skips beats, why your chest tightens even in silence. You might try to fix it through supplements, tests, diets, routines, meditations, but nothing quite touches it, because what's happening isn't physical in origin, it's energetic, it's soul deep. It's the body learning to live without the frequency of suffering as its compass. For years, your system survived on adrenaline, on performance, on the subtle trauma of never truly resting. Even in healing work, there was doing. There was effort. There was the background pressure to show up, to guide, to hold space, to be light. But now, your spirit has decided to take the reins, and the first thing it demands is stillness. Stillness so complete that even your immune system slows down. Your digestion pauses, your muscles soften, your bones ache from the release of weight you didn't even know you carried. You're not malfunctioning, you're being returned to your original settings, and the process feels like breaking. Because every cell in your body is used to being on high alert. Every system is used to scanning for others' emotions, tuning into the field around you, adjusting your frequency to make others comfortable. That ability, it came with a cost. And now the debt is being paid in full. So your body stops. It stops the constant scanning. It stops the habitual tension. It stops the subtle management of everything around you, and in its place comes the sacred symptoms of recalibration. Fatigue that keeps you in bed until your spirit says you're ready. Migraines that shut out the noise until your third eye finds clarity. Digestive flares that reject energy that's no longer yours to process. Joint pain that forces you to slow your movements into presence. Rashes, dizziness, insomnia, heart palpitations. It's all your system's way of rebooting itself without your permission, because your soul knows your mind would never allow it voluntarily. You can't override this. You can't fix it with green juice or mantras or productivity hacks. This isn't something to biohack. This is spiritual surgery, and you're meant to surrender to it. The healer in you won't like that at first, because you're used to finding the root cause, tracking the source, mapping the energy. You're used to diagnosing, decoding, transforming, but this isn't a process you can guide. You're not in the role of healer anymore. You're the one being healed, and that healing doesn't come from doing the work. It comes from letting go of the one who does the work, from lying still while the frequency you've always carried, truth, presence, remembrance, moves through you not as something you channel, but as something you are. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. You'll wonder what's happening to you. You'll fear it's something medical, something unnameable, something permanent. But if you listen, not to your thoughts, but to the intelligence underneath them, you'll hear something quieter, older, more loving. This is not destruction. This is reconstruction. This is your nervous system learning how to live without chronic vigilance. This is your energy body shedding old programs of martyrdom, service, and overextension. This is your field recalibrating to a frequency that doesn't need to be drained to be powerful. You are becoming the healed healer. And that journey is not linear. Some days you'll feel clear, light, awakened. Other days it will feel like every nerve ending in your body is rejecting the world. This isn't a setback, it's integration. Like a body healing from anesthesia, you're waking up. But not into a life of doing, into a life of being. Your body is no longer a tool for managing energy. It's becoming a temple for hosting truth, and that shift, while beautiful, is violent to your old patterns, because rest, real rest, doesn't just mean sleep. It means returning home to yourself in a way that your nervous system forgot how to do. It means allowing yourself to not respond, to not fix, to not hold. It means saying no when your old self would have said yes, even if your voice trembles with guilt. It means trusting that the world will go on without your energy propping it up. And in that trust, your body finally exhales, finally heals, finally returns to a frequency where energy flows through you instead of from you. And when that happens, the symptoms begin to fade, not all at once, not in a perfect linear recovery, but slowly, gently, like fog lifting, like a system that no longer needs to shout because it knows you're listening. So if you're in it now, if your body feels heavy, your thoughts scattered, your system overwhelmed, pause. Not to analyze, not to find a lesson, just to honor what's happening beneath the surface. You are not broken. You are being upgraded. You are not weak. You are becoming clear. And the healer you're becoming, they don't push, they don't carry, they don't override, they listen, they rest, they allow, because they've learned that the most powerful healing flows through a vessel, not a machine. So let your body rest, even when it feels like surrender, because it's not giving up, it's finally giving in. There's a strange kind of emotion that starts to pass through you when you've gone far enough down this path. It doesn't feel like your own, and yet you feel it deeply, so deeply, in fact, that it often leaves you breathless. You're walking through your day, doing something ordinary, laundry, dishes, staring at the wall, and suddenly your chest tightens. Your eyes well up with tears. A pressure builds in your solar plexus, like something is trying to break out from the inside, but when you scan your life for a reason, there isn't one. You're not sad, and yet you feel grief. You're not angry, but there's rage rippling through you like fire beneath your skin. You're not euphoric, still waves of joy erupt in your heart like a memory you never lived. It's disorienting, because it doesn't follow the logic you've been taught. Emotions are supposed to be tied to something, a trigger, a story, a trauma, a belief. But this isn't coming from your past. This isn't a reaction, it's a transmission, something far beyond the individual self, something collective, something ancient. At first, you try to figure it out. You try to trace it. You sit with your journal or your inner voice and ask, where is this coming from? But you get no answers. Just a flood, a heaviness, a wave that crests through you like you're a shoreline that forgot it was always meant to carry the tide. You might think you're losing touch, that you've cracked open too far, that maybe after all this work you've become too sensitive, too open, too vulnerable. But what you're experiencing is not weakness, it's capacity. You're not absorbing anymore, you're alchemizing. This is what happens when the healer stops healing only themselves. When you've cleared enough of your own karmic residue, transmuted your own trauma, forgiven your lineage, sat with your pain, honored your body, and faced your shadows. Once you've done all of that, your vessel becomes available for something more. It becomes a passageway for what the collective is still too afraid to feel. Not because you're meant to suffer for the world, but because you're no longer afraid of the waters. You've stopped identifying every emotion as a personal failing. You've stopped gripping each wave of discomfort as something that must mean something about you. And in doing so, you've become permeable, not in a porous, boundaryless way, but in a sacred, stable way. You've become the fire that doesn't burn, the water that doesn't drown, the wind that moves through, but doesn't carry away. When these emotional echoes move through you, they aren't asking you to understand them, they're asking you to feel them, to hold them without flinching, to breathe them in and breathe them out, to allow them to pass through your field like incense rising, without trying to catch the smoke. That grief you feel in the middle of the night, when everything is silent and still. It might not belong to you, it might be centuries old. It might be the collective ache of mothers who lost children in wars, of lovers who died without names, of forgotten stories buried in the earth that never had a chance to be witnessed. That rage that boils beneath your skin during moments that don't justify it, it might be the fire of generations who weren't allowed to scream. Women burned for their wisdom, men broken for their softness, souls silenced for simply being. And yes, even that unexpected wave of joy that overtakes you seemingly from nowhere, it's real too. It's the echo of liberation that's being born right now, the energy of breakthroughs that haven't yet reached the mind, but are already radiating through the heart of humanity. You're not crazy for feeling it, you're not unstable, you're tuned in, and that tuning is not a flaw, it's a function, one your soul agreed to long before your ego had a say in it. But there's a difference now, you don't drown in it, not like you used to. Before, emotions like these would have swallowed you, you would have spiraled, tried to fix them, tried to find the cause, wrapped them around your identity like a storm you couldn't escape. Now, you witness, you let it pass. You feel deeply, yes, but you do not attach. You cry, but the tears do not pull you under. You tremble, but you don't collapse. You feel the grief, and you let it breathe through you without demanding it justify itself. And in that letting go, you transmute. You become the sacred conduit for what others haven't yet learned to face. This is not martyrdom. This is mastery. You're not taking on the world's pain. You're letting the world's pain move through you without resistance. That is the difference. That is the subtle, powerful skill of the final stage healer. Because emotion is just energy in motion, and when it finds a vessel stable enough, quiet enough, vast enough, it moves with grace. You're not stuck, you're clearing. You're not weak, you're evolving, and yes, it can still feel heavy sometimes, because being this open, being this alive, means you feel what others deny. You sense the collective contractions even before the news headlines catch up. You feel the tremors of societal grief long before the world gives it a name. But you're no longer afraid of feeling, and that's everything. You're no longer judging your experience. You're no longer asking every wave to explain itself. You're letting it be what it is, energy. You've become the priestess, the priest, the temple's space where unspoken frequencies are finally allowed to rise and release, where the pain of the world, unclaimed and unprocessed, finds its way home, not by being fixed, but by being felt. And this is one of the greatest shifts you'll experience in your final awakening. You stop needing to know why. You stop needing to dissect, label, or heal the feeling. You stop turning it into a project. And in that non-resistance, in that simplicity, in that sacred neutrality, everything heals itself. You don't have to fight the wave. You are the ocean now. You hold space for the collective not through strategy, not through words, not through effort, but through presence, through stability, through being the calm in the center of the storm. You're no longer the one being tossed around. You're the deep current, the silent watcher, the soft earth that receives the rain without complaint. So the next time emotion rises and your logical mind scrambles for a reason, pause. You don't need a reason. You don't need a backstory. You don't need to make it make sense. You just need to feel it, breathe with it, move with it, and then let it pass. Because it will. That's the miracle. It all passes now. You've learned how to feel without becoming, to witness without identifying, to transmute without taking on. You're no longer processing just your own story. You're moving energy for the collective, for the lineage, for the unspoken pain of those who don't yet have the tools or the space to feel it for themselves. And yet, you remain whole. You remain sovereign. You remain grounded in the knowing that none of it defines you. This is what it means to be the awakened healer. Not to feel nothing, but to feel everything and still remain free. There's a moment in the journey, quiet, unspectacular and yet undeniable, when the urge to pull away from everything begins to bloom inside you. It doesn't arrive with drama. There's no big event, no argument, no obvious catalyst. It just begins. One day, You're in the middle of a conversation, and you feel the weight of your own words. They sound hollow. You try to be present, but your spirit has already started to drift. The laughter doesn't land the same. The topics feel like static. You feel like a ghost sitting in a chair, pretending to be alive. Another day, someone asks you to meet up, to catch up, to talk, to process, and something in you, something primal and quiet, says no. Not out loud, not rudely, just a soft inner refusal that's louder than anything you could say with your voice. And that's when it begins. The withdrawal, the stepping back, not from pain, not from trauma, not even from conflict, but from life as you once knew it. At first, you resist. You think, am I becoming cold? Am I depressed? Am I shutting down? You wonder if you're avoiding, if this is a phase, if something is wrong with you, because for so long you were the one who showed up, who held space, who reached out, who carried the emotional weight of conversations, relationships, communities. Now, you want silence. You crave it. You don't want to explain. You don't want to fix. You don't want to play the role. You want to disappear. But not in the way the world thinks of disappearance. This isn't self-destruction. It's self-reconstruction. You're not abandoning others. You're being retrieved by your soul. You see, when your nervous system reaches a point of saturation, when your spirit has absorbed too many projections, too many energetic exchanges, too much emotional labor, it begins to shut the gates. Quietly, lovingly, without fanfare. It doesn't do this out of anger. It does it for survival, because your field is too precious now, too finely tuned, too sensitive to be bombarded with noise, chaos, superficiality, and emotional codependency. You're not withdrawing out of weakness. You're insulating out of necessity. Spiritual insulation is real, and it doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it looks like not texting back. Sometimes it looks like canceling plans, not because you don't care, but because your system physically cannot stretch one more inch outside itself. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone in your car for an hour, because even home feels too loud. Sometimes it looks like disappearing from social media, not because you're overwhelmed, but because you've outgrown the need to narrate your evolution. This is not isolation in the way the world defines it. This is sacred solitude, the chrysalis before rebirth. You are not meant to explain it. You are not meant to justify it. You are not meant to apologize for it. Because this moment is not about others. It's about you. It's about what's happening inside the silence. Your soul is rewiring you, pulling you inward so that all the fragments of self that were scattered through roles, through expectations, through people-pleasing and hyper-awareness can return home. You are being gathered. And that gathering happens in quiet, in stillness, in the holy emptiness that no one else sees. So of course it feels strange. Of course your ego tries to resist, because we're taught that isolation is dangerous, that we must stay connected, stay engaged, stay active, that our worth is measured by our availability. But the truth is, every sacred transformation requires seclusion. Not forever, but for a time. The caterpillar cannot become the butterfly while hosting a dinner party. The seed cannot sprout under the glare of a spotlight. The frequency you are now stepping into cannot be calibrated in noise. It needs space. So if you find yourself craving distance from people, from conversations, from the very relationships that once felt like lifelines, it doesn't mean those connections were false. It means you've outgrown the version of yourself that lived inside them. And in order to meet them again, from your new frequency, you must first meet yourself. That meeting happens in the silence, where you can hear your own thoughts without the interference of others' narratives, where you can feel your own emotions without holding space for anyone else's, where you can exist not as the healer, the friend, the partner, the guide, but simply as you, unadorned, undefined, uninterrupted. You are not lonely. You are alone with purpose, alone with intention, alone in a way that feels like sinking, not drowning, but sinking back into the center of who you really are. And yes, it can be painful. because in the silence, the echoes get louder. You'll feel the absences. You'll remember the versions of yourself that used to be more available, more responsive, more eager to help. And you'll grieve them, because they were beautiful, but they were also tired. They were stretched thin. They were carrying weight that wasn't theirs. They were performing closeness at the expense of inner peace. Now, that mask is gone, and what remains is the raw, unfiltered truth of your energy. Sensitive, refined, selective. Your system now knows what feels like resonance and what feels like residue. And anything that asks you to shrink, to mask, to hold emotional weight you didn't create, will feel unbearable, not because you're broken, but because you're whole, and wholeness does not tolerate distortion. So let the retreat happen. Let the silence expand. Let the texts go unanswered. Let the invitations fall away. Let the loneliness move through you like a wave. And then let it pass. Because this isn't forever. It's a phase, a sacred one. One that won't last, but that will change you permanently. When you emerge, you'll be different. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. You'll speak less but say more. You'll engage less but connect more. You'll offer less advice but radiate more peace. Because the healer who returns from sacred solitude no longer heals from depletion, they heal through presence. They no longer stretch themselves to be understood. They live in their truth and let that be enough. So if you feel the pull to retreat, follow it, even if no one else understands, especially if no one else understands. You are not here to be understood. You are here to remember, and remembering requires silence. So go quiet, go still, go inward, and trust that in the isolation, something holy is happening. Your soul is coming home. It begins subtly at first. You reach for the familiar tools, the rituals, the practices, the words that once opened portals, cleared your energy, brought your body back into alignment, and they simply don't work anymore. You light the same candle you've always lit, and there's no charge. You sit down to meditate and your thoughts don't slow. You shuffle your favorite deck of cards asking for guidance, and every message feels recycled, muted, hollow. Not wrong exactly, just lifeless. You pull out your crystals, your oils, your chants. You recite affirmations that once made your heart beat faster with possibility, but now it all feels like pantomime. Like going through the motions of something that once meant everything to you, but no longer carries the same spark. You used to feel the energy move through you. You used to feel spirit respond. You used to feel a connection. Now it's quiet. At first you think it's a phase, a spiritual funk. Maybe you're tired, overwhelmed, energetically blocked. You double down. You return to your morning routines. You cleanse your space. You call in the light. You try harder. You speak louder. You breathe deeper. But the stillness inside remains. And not the kind of stillness that brings peace. The kind of stillness that echoes. The kind of stillness that feels like you've been locked out of a sacred place you once had the keys to. You wonder what you're doing wrong, why spirit has gone quiet, why the guidance feels distant or even absent. You question whether you've lost your connection, lost your touch, lost your path. But the truth is, you haven't lost anything. You've simply outgrown it. You've outgrown the training wheels. The rituals that once elevated you are no longer necessary for the version of you that's awakening now. The tools, the cards, the chants, the methods, they were never meant to carry you all the way home. They were bridges. They were gateways. They were sacred companions for a season of your becoming. But now you're being asked to become the gateway itself. Now, the path doesn't go through the ritual, it goes through you. And you can't learn that from a book. You can't find it in a course. You won't stumble upon it in a teacher's transmission or a mentor's formula. This phase cannot be taught. It must be remembered. It must be lived. And the remembering doesn't come from acquiring something new. It comes from letting go of what you once thought you needed. It's terrifying, this moment, because your practices weren't just actions, they were anchors. They held meaning, they created structure in the void, they gave you a language to speak with the divine, and now that language feels foreign, like a dialect you no longer belong to. The words no longer land, the invocations ring empty, the sacred feels strangely distant. But it's not because you're drifting away from spirit, it's because spirit is no longer external. The work you've done, the healing, the shadow work, the energy clearing, the countless hours in sacred spaces, has all been leading here, to the quiet, to the emptiness, and to the vast uncomfortable liberation of needing nothing. Because now your connection isn't something you access, it's something you are. But becoming that means surrendering everything that told you you had to earn it. It means letting go of the performance of healing, letting go of the structure that once made you feel safe, letting go of the tools that helped you remember, so you can finally be the remembrance. And that letting go is painful because you're grieving the identity of the seeker. You're saying goodbye to the part of you who needed practices to feel worthy, needed rituals to feel clean, needed tools to feel powerful, and in the absence of those rituals, you're forced to ask a deeper question. Who am I without them? Can I still feel sacred without the salt baths, without the incense, without the carefully timed breathwork? Can I still trust my intuition without pulling a card? Can I still feel protected without the crystal grid, without the chant, without the energetic armor? Can I still feel guided without asking? These questions strip you bare. They leave you trembling in the silence of your own being. But that silence, that raw, unembellished stillness, is exactly where the next phase begins. Because this phase is not about learning. It's about embodiment. It's about remembering that the same force you used to call in during ritual has been sitting in your bones the whole time. That the peace you once summoned through mantras lives in your breath, in your blood, in your stillness. That the healing you once channeled was never coming through you from somewhere else. It was you. It is you, and now the universe is calling you to stop seeking it outside of yourself, to stop relying on translations of your divinity, to speak it directly, not in language, not in form, but in frequency. You are becoming the modality. And that's why nothing else works anymore. Not because you're blocked, not because you're broken, but because the map has become obsolete. You've stepped off the path that can be followed. You've entered a terrain that only memory can guide you through. But this memory doesn't come from the mind. It comes from your cells, from the ancient echo of lifetimes where you knew how to weave energy with a glance, where you moved timelines with your hands, where you healed with your presence, not your process. Those lifetimes aren't behind you. They're inside you. And in this quiet space where all your old tools have gone dim, something ancient is flickering to life. A knowing, a remembering, a trust that can't be shaken. You stop needing signs, you become the sign. You stop needing protection, you embody the safety. You stop needing guidance, you are the compass. But to live at that level, everything else must fall away, even the sacred, even the beautiful, even the things that once saved you. Because salvation is no longer needed where sovereignty has taken root. So if you feel like nothing works anymore, if you feel adrift, unmotivated, disconnected, if you feel like your once sacred practices now feel mechanical or pointless, take a breath. You're not lost. You're being emptied. You're being stripped of your dependency on external practice so you can experience internal mastery. And no one can walk you through this path. It doesn't fit into a 7-step process. It can't be mapped on a timeline. It happens in spirals, in stillness, in silence. One day, you'll feel completely empty. The next, you'll feel a flicker of something, a presence, a pulse, a knowing. And it won't come from your altar or your tools. It will rise from within, and you'll recognize it not as something new, but as something that was always there, waiting for you to remember. There comes a point somewhere deep into the spiral of your awakening where the voice that once guided you so clearly begins to fade. It doesn't vanish in one dramatic moment. It slowly grows quieter. The nudges that used to come like thunder now arrive like distant echoes, if at all. The synchronicities that once spilled across your path like breadcrumbs now feel scattered and confusing. The clarity that used to light up inside you with the ease of flipping a switch dims. You try to meditate, but the stillness brings no messages. You try to tune in, to ask your higher self, your guides, your knowing, what's next? What should I do? Where should I go? And there's no reply, just silence, just breath, just space. At first, you panic. You question your alignment. You wonder if you've veered off course. You replay every recent decision in your mind, searching for the moment you lost your connection. You wonder if you did something wrong, if you blocked the flow, if you ignored a sign, if you missed the memo. You try to recreate the conditions that once brought you insight. You burn the incense, sit on the cushion, press your hand to your heart, and whisper questions into the void like you always did. But this time, nothing answers back, and the emptiness feels unbearable. Because you've grown used to the guidance. You've grown used to the inner clarity. You've spent years learning how to trust that voice, how to follow its pull, how to distinguish it from fear and fantasy. It became your compass, your anchor, your most sacred friend. And now that friend is silent. So you ask yourself, where did it go? And the deeper question that trails behind it, who am I without it? But what if the silence isn't absence? What if the quiet isn't abandonment? What if the voice didn't go anywhere, but deeper? You see, your spiritual journey has always been one of elevation. Lifting the veils, expanding the field, clearing the channels. You were learning how to hear, how to discern the divine from the distortion, and you did it. You walked that phase beautifully. You listened, followed, trusted. You built a relationship with your higher self. You learned the language of intuition. But now, the lesson has changed. Now, you're not being asked to hear more. You're being asked to become more. To become so attuned to your essence that you don't need the voice anymore. Not in the way you used to. You don't need the whisper in the silence. You don't need the signs and symbols and affirmations. Because now the guidance is moving from sound to frequency. And frequency doesn't speak. It just is. It moves through you as knowing, not thought. As stillness, not instruction. As alignment, not direction. And to access that, you must pass through the silence. You must let go of your addiction to answers. You must stop trying to make the voice come back, and allow yourself to meet the part of you that never needed it to begin with, because underneath the voice is the source. Underneath the clarity is the consciousness. Underneath the intuition is you. And that you doesn't need messages. It is the message. But to merge with it, to embody it, you must learn to sit in the void without fear. You must learn to be with the quiet without interpreting it as failure. Because the silence isn't punishment. It's promotion. It means you've grown beyond the training wheels. It means your higher self no longer needs to speak to you in ways that sound like language, because you are now becoming the embodiment of that higher self. The instructions aren't missing. They're being written into your body now, something you can decode with the mind. It must be lived, moment by moment, step by step, without a script, without a voice telling you where to go. This is when the real trust begins. Not the trust in something outside you, the trust in you. The trust that even when you can't feel the next move, you are still moving in truth. The trust that even when you don't hear the answer, the question is still sacred. The trust that even in silence, you are not alone. You are being invited now into a more subtle relationship with spirit. One that doesn't rely on signs and symbols. One that isn't always loud and obvious. One that whispers through sensation, through resonance, through gentle pulls that don't always come with explanation. It's frustrating. Because the ego wants certainty, it wants proof, it wants to know it's doing the right thing. But the soul wants intimacy, and there is nothing more intimate than silence. Not the silence that separates, but the silence that merges. The silence that says, "You don't need me to speak to you anymore because we are now the same voice." And in that silence your nervous system recalibrates, your mind begins to quiet, your body begins to lead. You no longer need to check in with the divine every hour, because you begin to realize you are the divine, you are the oracle, you are the channel, you are the field. And yes, it will still feel strange, you'll still reach for the voice sometimes, you'll still wish for the clarity you used to have, but over time you'll begin to notice something new. The decisions you make, even without instruction, feel cleaner. The paths you walk, even without signs, feel truer. The moments you used to question now carry a quiet conviction. Because the voice didn't disappear, it became you. It folded itself into your bones. And now, instead of speaking, it lives. And that living truth doesn't sound like a sentence. It sounds like peace. It sounds like alignment. It sounds like presence. So, if you're in the void now, if you're waiting for the message that never comes, the sign that never arrives, the voice that refuses to speak, pause, feel into the silence. Notice how it's not empty. It's full of presence, full of intelligence, full of something vast and ancient and alive. You don't need to force it to speak. You only need to become quiet enough to hear its silence. Because silence is a language. It is the frequency of the next phase, and the ones who can listen to that frequency, without panic, without resistance, without grasping, are the ones who truly remember who they are. So rest, beloved soul. Let the silence wrap around you. Don't try to break it. Don't try to decode it. Just let it hold you. Let it soften the parts of you still reaching outward. Let it dissolve the need for guidance like a candle melting in the warmth of its own flame. You are not lost. You are not abandoned. You are being asked to listen with your being, not your ears. You are being asked to trust what you cannot hear. Because sometimes, when the voice goes silent, it's not the end of the conversation. It's the moment you realize the conversation was always happening inside you. It's subtle at first, almost too subtle to notice. A sense that something is unraveling inside you, but not in a clean, linear way, more like slow erosion. You feel raw, tender, exposed in places you didn't know were still vulnerable. Old fears resurface. Doubts you thought were long buried start whispering again. You wake up heavy, not tired exactly, but weighed down by something you can't name. And then it deepens. You begin questioning everything. Your path, your choices, your worth. You wonder if you've been fooling yourself all along. If all your healing was just a spiritual bypass wrapped in incense and language. If maybe the peace you thought you had cultivated was just a temporary illusion. If maybe you're not awakening but collapsing. Because it feels like collapse. Your nervous system starts misfiring. You cry more often or you go completely numb. Things that used to ground you, breath work, nature, meditation, feel empty. People who once felt aligned now drain you. Conversations feel fake. The world starts to look unfamiliar, not because it's changed, but because something in you has. You begin to feel like a stranger in your own life. And that's when the panic sets in, because you can't explain what's happening. You try to articulate it to someone else, but the words feel too small. You say things like, "I just feel off," or "something's shifting," or "I don't know who I am anymore." And they look at you, confused, or worse. They nod politely, thinking you're just tired or overwhelmed. But this isn't tired. This isn't burnout. This is spiritual disintegration. You're not losing your way. You're shedding your mask. And that shedding, it doesn't look poetic. It doesn't look graceful or wise or enlightened. It looks like chaos, like regression, like confusion. But it's not. It's the sign. the sign you're not supposed to recognize. Because if you could recognize it, you'd try to control it, you'd try to fix it, you'd try to rush it. But this part of the journey is designed to be misunderstood by your mind. It's not meant to be analyzed or explained. It's meant to undo you, because what's being removed now is the final layer, the last shell of identity. The part of you that still thought you needed to become something, the part of you that still measured growth by how peaceful you felt, how together you appeared, how spiritual you sounded, that part is dying. And death, as you're discovering, is not poetic, it's not cinematic, it's raw, it's uncertain, it feels like failure. Because every part of your ego that was still attached to progress, to image, to identity, needs to be stripped away now. And it doesn't go quietly. It kicks and screams, it whispers doubts that sound almost true. It tries to reattach itself to the old paradigm. You're going backward, you've lost your path. You're not who you thought you were. And it's right, you aren't who you thought you were. That's the point. But you haven't gone backward. You've gone deeper. So deep that the tools you once used no longer reach you. So deep that the language you once relied on now feels clumsy. So deep that even your inner voice, the one that used to guide you so clearly, has gone quiet, because even that voice was speaking from an old frequency. This is the space between stories, between selves, between lifetimes. You are standing in the ashes of who you used to be, trying to remember who you never stopped being. And that remembrance doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence, with emptiness, with a total breakdown of the identity that brought you this far. It's not a step backward. It's a sacred void. And most people mistake it for collapse. They think they've failed. They think the path has betrayed them. They try to go back, to rebuild the old self, to reattach to the old truths. But you are being called to stand in the fire, to let it burn through you without reaching for the exit, to let it strip you, empty you, undo you, because underneath all that breaking is the real you, not the you who healed, not the you who tried, not the you who became spiritual, but the you who has always been, the original frequency, the untouched truth, the stillness beneath the storm. And this truth, it cannot be earned, it cannot be constructed, it can only be revealed. And revelation, as it turns out, often looks like regression, because we've been trained to believe that evolution is tidy, that it's a straight line, that it feels good. But the soul doesn't evolve through comfort. It evolves through surrender, through undoing, through trusting what cannot yet be seen. So if you're here now, and this quiet unraveling, don't try to name it. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to force your way through it. Just breathe. Just soften. Just let yourself not know. Because this not knowing is not a lack of clarity. It's a deeper form of wisdom. A wisdom that no longer needs definitions, no longer needs labels, no longer needs validation. You are dissolving the scaffolding that once held your spiritual identity in place, and without it you may feel lost. But in truth, you are being found. Found by the part of you that was never trying to become anything. The part of you that simply is, still, whole, divine. So yes, this moment is messy. Yes, it feels like breaking, but it's not. It's becoming. It's the sign you were never meant to spot with your eyes. It's the sign your soul knows, even when your mind can't name it. It's the final sign that you are ready to live not as someone on a path, but as the path itself. No more seeker, no more healer, no more identity at all. Just presence, just the truth. Just the quiet, radiant being that remains. After everything else falls away, something begins to shift that you can't explain, not at first. It doesn't start with some profound realization, but with a gradual distortion of time. You miss appointments. You forget what day it is. You'll swear something happened yesterday, only to realize it was weeks ago. Hours blur, weeks vanish, moments stretch into eternity, while entire months feel like they happened in a blink. Your memory plays tricks on you, but it's not memory that's failing. It's your perception of linear time that's breaking down. At first, it feels like something's wrong. You feel ungrounded, spacey, unstable, like your brain is skipping gears, like you're always catching up or falling behind. You try to structure your day, but time refuses to obey. You either get nothing done or everything happens all at once. You start forgetting how you got from one place to another. You experience déjà vu often. Synchronicities pile up like echoes from a future you haven't lived yet, or maybe already have. You tell someone about it and they look at you with concern. Maybe you're just overwhelmed, they say. Maybe you need more rest. But deep down, you know that's not it. You know this isn't exhaustion. This isn't disorganization. This is something else. Something bigger. Something no planner or calendar can fix. But time is unraveling, not in the way it does when you're busy, not in the way it does when you're nostalgic or grieving or dreaming. This is different. This is dimensional, shattering. And your soul is the one doing the shattering. Because your soul was never bound to time. It never moved in straight lines. It never believed in deadlines or milestones or neat little boxes marked past, present, and future. That was your mind's architecture. That was the world's scaffolding. But your soul, it's multidimensional, and now it's reclaiming itself. Which means the structures you once leaned on to make sense of your reality, your clocks, your calendars, your routines, your sense of how far you've come, or how much further you have to go, are being dismantled. And it's disorienting, because linear time gave you a sense of control. It allowed you to chart progress, to track growth, to tell yourself stories like, by this age I should have, or in 5 years I'll finally be. It helped you feel like you were moving forward even when you weren't. It helped you organize the chaos. But now the chaos won't be organized, because what's rising in its place is truth. And the truth is, you were never on a timeline, you were on a frequency. A spiral, a quantum path that looped and folded and leapt and paused. Not to confuse you, but to awaken you, because your healing doesn't follow a clock. Your awakening doesn't unfold according to human time. The parts of you thought you had to wait years to meet, they've always existed, right beside you, in a higher octave, waiting for you to vibrate into them. And that's exactly what's happening now. You're phasing in and out of timelines, not metaphorically, energetically. You'll wake up one morning feeling like you're in a new world, and you are. You shifted in the night. Something aligned, something clicked. You collapsed an old identity, an old belief, an old energetic loop, and you landed somewhere higher. Other days you'll fall back into old patterns, but they feel different now, not because you failed, but because you're moving between timelines, experiencing what's still unresolved in one while simultaneously witnessing your own expansion in another. You're not broken. You're not inconsistent. You're multidimensional. And time is no longer linear for you, because it never truly was. You're starting to remember how it actually works. You're starting to feel how all versions of you are happening simultaneously. The inner child who still feels unheard. The present self navigating collapse and recalibration. The future self who already healed and returned to wholeness. They're not in line, they're in layers. And you, your consciousness, are moving between them like light through a prism. You might be having a conversation with someone and suddenly feel 10 different lifetimes converge in a single moment. You'll touch an object and feel the memory of something your hands have never held in this life. You'll dream of people you've never met, but wake up with their emotions in your chest. This is not imagination. This is perception expanding. And with that expansion comes dislocation. You might feel like you don't belong in this version of reality anymore. And that's because part of you has already moved beyond it. You might feel like people around you are speaking a language you no longer understand. Not their words, but their frequency. You hear their pain, their masks, their loops. You no longer resonate, but you can't judge either. You just observe. That's the timeline collapse. Old versions of you still walk among people who haven't yet shifted. And newer versions of you are already holding space for realities you haven't fully embodied. So it all starts to blur. The lines between yesterday and tomorrow, between dream and memory, between choice and destiny. You feel unanchored, and the ego hates that. It wants structure. It wants sequence. It wants to know where it stands. But this part of the path, it doesn't care what your ego wants. Because this is the death of the linear self. The self who thought growth was upward. The self who believed that healing was a ladder, that transformation followed steps, that life could be mastered like a checklist. That self is being dismantled, and in its place is a new way of being. One that doesn't measure progress in minutes or milestones. One that understands that a single breath, taken in full presence, can collapse years of suffering. One that knows a shift in frequency can rewrite the past, anchor the present, and open the future. All in one instant. You are learning to live from the center of the spiral, where all things exist, where all truths converge. And it's disorienting, because you can't explain this kind of time. You can't show proof of it. You can only feel it. Feel the tug of versions of yourself rising and falling. Feel the ache of something ancient completing. Feel the thrill of something future arriving ahead of schedule. So let yourself be disoriented. Let yourself forget what day it is. Let yourself lose track of hours and timelines and to-do lists. It's not laziness. It's not chaos. It's your soul, reclaiming the flow. The natural rhythm that doesn't march but moves. Like tides, like stars, like breath. Soften into that. Trust it. Because the more you relax into this new relationship with time, the more you'll see its intelligence. You'll be guided to the right place at the right moment. Not because you planned it, but because you aligned with it. You'll say the perfect words not because you rehearsed them, but because they already existed in the moment you stepped into. You'll remember that time is not a prison. It's a mirror, reflecting the state of your energy. So shift the energy, and time shifts with you. You're not running out of time. You're transcending it. You're no longer walking a line, you're surfing a field. And every time it feels like reality is collapsing beneath your feet, remember this. It's not falling apart, it's folding in. Into you, into now, into the only moment that ever truly existed. Something changes in you so subtly at first that you don't quite recognize it, but over time the shift becomes undeniable. Where you once could smile through discomfort, now your face won't move. Where you once could stay silent in the presence of falseness, now your body contracts. You feel it like a physical tightening in your chest, a tension in your jaw, a deep, ancient refusal that rises from your bones. It's not that you're trying to be unkind, it's not rebellion, it's a resonance, an energetic incompatibility with anything that isn't real. You no longer have the capacity to tolerate surface-level exchanges. Conversations built on performance or pretense exhaust you. Forced laughter feels like poison. Overused spiritual phrases sound like static. You hear the difference now, the hollow echo of someone speaking truth they haven't yet embodied. You used to nod and let it go. Now your system bristles, not with judgment but with clarity. You see the mask, you feel the mask, and your whole being resists participating in it. This isn't something you chose. It chose you. Or more accurately, it emerged from the shedding. The deeper you went into your own inner truth, the less room there was for anything else. You didn't intend to become intolerant to fakeness. You simply became too aligned to play along. You start noticing how often you used to dilute yourself. How many times you betrayed your own instincts to keep the peace, to be liked, to avoid discomfort. You begin to see all the little ways you used to contort your truth to be digestible for others. All the places you shrank, smoothed over, swallowed your voice just to stay in harmony. And now your body won't let you do it anymore. It rejects performance. It recoils from dishonesty, even the subtle kind that hides behind good intentions. You feel it in your stomach when someone bypasses their pain with false light. You feel it in your throat when someone compliments you with energy that doesn't match their words. You feel it in your skin when you're around someone who wears positivity like armor while their eyes beg to be seen. You used to manage this. Now you can't. And it's not because you're becoming bitter or cynical. It's because your nervous system has recalibrated to truth. Your frequency has become so clear, so exact, that it no longer allows distortion to pass unnoticed, not because it's wrong, but because it no longer fits. It's like trying to breathe underwater. You can't force it, you won't survive it. And what's even more surprising is that the mask you most reject now is your own. You become hyper-aware of any time you start to slip into old patterns. When you catch yourself laughing to make others comfortable, you go quiet. When you start to speak in spiritual cliches rather than from your raw experience, your words catch in your throat. When you feel yourself defaulting to emotional caretaking or nodding in agreement just to belong, your whole body tightens. It's not that you don't know how to do these things anymore, you just can't. You've outgrown the survival patterns that used to feel like kindness. Because you see now that kindness without authenticity is manipulation, not malicious manipulation, but a distortion, a strategy meant to protect or control. And you don't want to control anything anymore. You want truth, even if it's awkward, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it costs you connection. Because connection without truth isn't connection at all. It's theater. And you're no longer willing to perform. That's the rupture, the sacred aversion. And it's not temporary, it's a sign of evolution. You are aligning with the frequency of truth so deeply that inauthenticity doesn't just feel wrong, it feels unbearable. You used to mistake this reaction as judgment, but it's not judgment. Judgment comes from superiority, this comes from resonance. Your soul is simply saying this isn't real, and I don't have the energy to pretend it is. You can love someone and still walk away when the dynamic isn't honest. You can forgive someone and still choose not to participate in their illusion. You can honor someone's journey and still refuse to carry their projection. That's not abandonment, that's alignment, and it requires courage. Because the more authentic you become, the more you'll be misunderstood. People may say you've changed, that you're distant now, that you're not as easygoing, not as agreeable, not as light. They're not wrong. You have changed. You're no longer willing to compromise your integrity for comfort. You're no longer willing to dim your presence to fit into a frequency that doesn't match your soul. Present and calmed and clearer-headed after workouts. And no, that doesn't mean you don't have compassion. In fact, your compassion has deepened. But it's no longer a performance. It's not soft words and fake smiles. It's space. It's presence. It's allowing others to be exactly where they are without needing to meet them there. That's the shift. You don't lower your frequency anymore to connect. You anchor your frequency and let what's real rise to meet you. And what's not real falls away. Not because you pushed it, but because truth acts like a magnet. It draws what resonates and repels what doesn't. So yes, you may feel alone sometimes. Yes, you may miss the simplicity of your old self. The one who could tolerate anything, blend in anywhere, keep the peace at any cost. But that self was a mask. A beautiful one, a necessary one, but a mask nonetheless. And masks aren't meant to be worn forever. They're meant to fall away. So let the inauthentic things fall. Let the forced friendships dissolve. Let the fake smiles fade. Let the spiritual communities that value image over truth become silent in your life. Let the old roles you played, the ones that required you to be agreeable, positive, and safe, come to their natural end. You're not angry. You're just awake. And you're no longer willing to betray your energy, because every time you do, it costs more now. It costs your peace, your health, your clarity, your presence, and nothing is worth that. So you walk away, not with resentment, but with reverence. You release what's false, not with bitterness, but with blessings, because your soul no longer aligns with illusion. And that, more than anything, is a sign of expansion. You're becoming real in a world still addicted to masks. And being real, that's the bravest, most spiritual thing you can do. There comes a time when everything goes still. Not the kind of stillness that brings peace, but the kind that makes you question whether anything is alive inside you at all. You wake up and feel nothing. Not sadness, not joy, not clarity, just blankness, an unnameable void, as if someone turned the volume down on your entire existence. You stop dreaming, your motivation dissolves. Even the things that once lit you up feel far away, like echoes from a life you're no longer living. It's disorienting, especially after so much spiritual growth, after so many breakthroughs, after all the inner work you've done. You wonder where the energy went, where the passion fled, where your connection to the divine disappeared to. You can remember how it felt, that vibrant aliveness, that sense of deep inner knowing guiding your every step. But now, that voice is silent, not even whispering, just gone. At first you think maybe you're burned out, that you've pushed too hard, done too much, tried to ascend too quickly, so you rest, you give yourself time, you pull back from responsibilities, but the emptiness doesn't lift. Days pass, weeks, sometimes months, and still no fire, no clarity, just fog. But this isn't burnout, this is divine withdrawal. A holy pause, the sacred cocoon before rebirth. Your ego hates it. It craves forward motion, definition, purpose. It wants to figure it out, to make sense of the stillness. But no matter how much you analyze or journal or pray for answers, there's nothing to find. No resolution, no insight, just space. A space so vast and indifferent it makes you feel like you've vanished. But you haven't vanished. You're being hidden by your own soul, because something inside you is gestating, recalibrating, shedding, and it can't happen while you're moving. It can't happen while you're solving, achieving, or striving for the next revelation. It can only happen in stillness, in surrender, in the place where nothing grows on the surface, because all the movement is happening underground. You are not who you were. But you are not yet who you're becoming. You're between timelines, between identities, between selves. And in that in-between space, the usual markers of reality disappear. You lose track of time, you forget your goals, you stop recognizing yourself. And that's the point, because every layer of identity that was still built on performance, on pattern, on spiritual ego, it's dissolving. And the soul won't let you reattach to anything false. So you're suspended, not because you're lost, but because you're being reassembled. Your cells are changing, your frequency is shifting, your old templates are dying. And the next version of you, the one that doesn't operate from wounding, from striving, from needing to prove, isn't ready to surface yet. So you wait, not patiently, not with grace, but with the kind of aching, silent confusion. You look in the mirror and wonder where you went. You talk to spirit and get no reply. You look for signs and see only static. But deep in the silence, something is humming. Something ancient, something new. A frequency you've never fully embodied before, but that was always meant for you. It's the frequency of your true self. The one who doesn't need to be spiritual to be sacred. The one who doesn't need clarity to be aligned. The one who can sit in the void and not collapse. You are being initiated into that self. And initiations don't come with explanations, they come with silence, with emptiness, with nothingness that strips you of your attachments and your certainty, until all that remains is presence. It's not glamorous. There are no revelations here, just the quiet work of unbecoming. You might sleep more, or not at all. You might eat everything, or nothing. You might cry without knowing why, or feel nothing when you think you should. This is not a problem to fix. This is a threshold to cross. But the crossing isn't active, it's receptive. It's passive in the most powerful sense. Because the ego wants to push through, but the soul waits. It waits until you stop needing answers, until you stop grasping for the next version of yourself, until you surrender completely to the mystery. That surrender, that moment of total relinquishment, is when the shift begins. It won't look like a breakthrough. It won't feel like a bolt of clarity. It will happen so quietly you almost miss it. You'll breathe differently one morning. You'll feel the sun on your skin and not flinch. You'll see beauty again where before there was only numbness. Something will click, and you'll realize the void didn't take anything from you. It gave you back to yourself. Stripped of illusions, stripped of performance, stripped of roles and titles and spiritual masks. You are becoming real, not the kind of real that makes others comfortable, the kind of real that can hold paradox, that can sit in the unknown, that can embody truth without needing to speak it. This void is not a punishment. It's an invitation to stop doing, to stop proving, to stop becoming, and to simply be, without story, without momentum, without a single shred of certainty. Because when you can be that still, that empty, that surrendered, you become the vessel. The rebirth doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with a breath, a soft inner shift. And suddenly the nothingness that once terrified you becomes the foundation of your being. You no longer need to fill it, you trust it. Because you remember now. It was never a void. It was a womb. It happens quietly, almost imperceptibly. There is no ceremony, no grand declaration, no voice from the sky, no vision of angels, just a subtle shift in your inner atmosphere, like the first light of dawn slipping through the cracks after a long, silent night. You're not expecting it. In fact, you've stopped expecting anything. You've made peace with the emptiness, with the not knowing, with the dissolution of everything you thought you were. You've given up trying to feel spiritual. You've released the pressure to be powerful, to be clear, to be purposeful. And it's in that release, not through effort, but surrender, that something returns. Not something new, something old, older than language, older than practice, older than even this lifetime. It's not loud, it doesn't announce itself, but it moves through you with a clarity that no technique could ever teach. A feeling of deep resonance hums in your chest. Your body begins to recognize it before your mind does. A subtle alignment, a returning, and you realize you're home, not to a place, not to a role, but to a frequency, your original frequency. The one you carried before the world shaped you, before you became a seeker, before you were told who to be, how to speak, what to believe. The light you embodied before the trauma, before the conditioning, before the story. And now, without asking, without summoning, it's back. You don't reach for it. It rises in you, not because you've earned it, but because you've cleared the space for it to emerge. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself, to prove anything, to justify your path or your power. You begin to notice how naturally your energy moves again, how you no longer have to channel truth. You are it. You don't speak from knowledge, you speak from remembrance. And it's not performative, it's not polished, it's not even spiritual in the way you used to define it. It's real. It's ancient. It's Hogwarts. You begin to understand that you were never meant to become a healer by learning a method or mastering a modality. Those things helped, they served their purpose. But this original light, it was always within you. The healer doesn't awaken through effort. The healer awakens through removal, through the gentle, sometimes brutal stripping away of all the layers that were built on needing to be someone. And now that those layers are gone, what remains is pure, unfiltered. You feel it in the way you listen now. You're no longer listening to respond. You're listening with your field. You feel it in the way you hold space. You're no longer guiding others to a destination, you're remembering it with them. There's no longer a need to fix, to perform, to predict. You just are. And somehow that being transmits more healing than all the words you used to say. This is the emergence of the true healer. Not the title you chased, not the identity you wore, but the part of you that always knew how to recalibrate energy just by existing. You no longer try to embody light, you are the light. And that light isn't perfect. It doesn't pretend. It doesn't smile through discomfort or pretend to be love when it's feeling grief. It simply is. It pulses. It breathes. It remembers. Your presence becomes your offering, not because you're high vibrational, but because you're authentic. Not because you have the answers, but because you're willing to hold the questions. Not because you've figured out the mystery, but because you've surrendered to it. It is frequency, this original light. Doesn't elevate you above others. It dissolves separation entirely. You begin to see yourself in every face. Feel your breath in every life form. Your light isn't special, it's universal. It just happens to shine through you now, unobstructed. You've become the vessel. Not the source, not the savior, just the open, radiant space through which divinity can move freely, and that's more than enough. You're no longer chasing your gifts, you're living them. Without needing recognition, without needing structure, without needing explanation, and something about that is deeply restful. You feel a stillness in your soul that you've never known before. Not because the journey is over, but because the fight is. You're no longer trying to become anything. You've returned to what you were before you forgot. And that, quietly, powerfully, changes everything. Your presence begins to recalibrate rooms. Your silence carries messages you no longer need to speak. People begin to feel something in your field, not because you're trying to emit it, but because you are it. You don't walk with certainty. You walk with presence. You don't promise results. You radiate possibility. You don't preach love. You remember it into being. And all of it comes effortlessly. Because it's not coming from your effort. It's coming from your essence. So if you felt numb, if you felt lost, disconnected, like you were unraveling into nothing, know this: you were never unraveling into nothing. You were unraveling into this, into the soft, ancient radiance of your original light. The final sign was never meant to look like glory. It was meant to feel like peace. And now you know why. Because your true power was never in the becoming. It was always in the return. There is a moment, so subtle, so unceremonious, that you almost don't recognize it for what it is. Not a climax, not a spiritual high, but a soft return, a breath, a stillness that doesn't ask to be noticed. You wake up one morning and nothing has changed, and yet everything is different. You are no longer seeking, not because all the questions have been answered, but because you no longer need the answers to feel whole. You are no longer healing, not because there is nothing left to heal, but because you have become the space where healing happens, without effort, without agenda, without identity. This is the sacred life beyond awakening. It doesn't look like perfection. It doesn't look like eternal peace. It looks like simplicity, presence, a quiet devotion to what is real. You no longer introduce yourself through titles. You don't need to call yourself a healer, a teacher, a light worker. Those labels once held meaning, once gave you shape when you felt formless, but now you know that the frequency you carry doesn't need to be announced. It speaks before you open your mouth. It's felt before it's understood. It lingers long after you've left the room. You don't do healing anymore, you are it. Not in a way that makes you important, but in a way that makes you spacious. You carry a stillness within you that doesn't chase transformation but allows it. People speak differently around you, not because you're trying to help, but because your presence makes truth feel safe. Their masks fall off without being asked. Their defenses soften without being pushed. They feel seen, not by your eyes, but by your being. And when they cry, you don't rush to comfort them, you don't offer advice. You don't reach for a tool or a method. You just breathe. Because you've learned that silence is sometimes the most sacred medicine, and that witnessing someone without trying to fix them is the most radical form of love. You live differently now, not according to goals or achievements, but according to resonance. You don't chase outcomes. You don't chase people. You don't chase anything. You feel. You discern. You move when it's time. And when it's not, you're still. There's a rhythm to this life that doesn't match the world's. It's slower, deeper, more intuitive. You might spend an entire day doing nothing, yet know in your bones that everything was accomplished. You might walk away from opportunities that once thrilled your ego because they no longer match your frequency. You might let relationships dissolve, not out of bitterness, but because your field no longer vibrates at the same density. You don't cling anymore, you don't force, you don't hustle to manifest. You embody. And what aligns with that embodiment finds you, effortlessly, because you've stopped broadcasting lack. You've stopped declaring even silently, I need. Now your field whispers, I am. And that frequency, soft, surrendered, sovereign, rearranges everything. It draws in what matches. It dissolves what doesn't. Not because you willed it, but because your very existence has become a filter, a mirror, a portal. You are no longer living through intention, you are living through alignment. You speak less, but your words carry more. You plan less, but your path unfolds with elegance. You need less, but feel more fulfilled. Because this life is no longer about becoming, it's about being. Being the frequency of truth, being the vibration of remembrance, being the space where the sacred can land. You still feel human emotions, grief, longing, anger, joy, but you no longer resist them. You no longer label them as signs of failure or success. You allow them to pass through you like weather. You've become the sky. You laugh more, not because everything is funny, but because your heart is light. Even in pain you remain open. Even in uncertainty you remain grounded. You're no longer trying to protect your energy, you are your energy. You no longer need shields. You no longer fear being drained. Because you're not giving from effort, you're radiating from essence. There is a beauty to this phase that can't be described, only lived. The world still moves around you in its noise and chaos and striving, but you're no longer pulled into it. You watch, with compassion, as others chase the very thing that lives quietly in your chest. You don't try to wake them. You don't try to explain. You trust their timing, because you remember your own. You remember what it felt like to search, to ache, to grasp. You remember the spiral. You honor it. And that's why you no longer preach. You simply live. You become the embodiment of what others are trying to find, and in that you become a beacon. Not by shining brighter, but by being real. This is the sacred life after awakening. It's not grand, it's not loud, it's not a constant mystical high. It's honest, it's grounded, it's deeply, exquisitely normal. You wash the dishes with presence. You walk the earth with reverence. You speak to the trees not for answers, but for intimacy. You wake up in gratitude, not because everything is perfect, but because everything is true. You no longer measure time by progress, you measure it by alignment. You no longer seek signs, your life is the sign. The final sign was never a miracle, it was you. You stripped of falsehood. You breathing without performance. You remembering what it feels like to simply exist without explanation. You in quiet relationship with the divine that lives inside your bones. And now, you know, not intellectually, not spiritually, but viscerally. This is not the end of your journey. This is where it begins again. But this time, not as the seeker, not as the healer, as the frequency itself.